the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Well, global turmoil is deepening. We've got the Russian-Ukraine war escalating, and nobody seems to care, John.
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, this is the weirdest thing, right? People are, half the people in this country seem to be upset about the fact that nobody's wearing masks anymore. The other half seem to be focused on trans rights, who gets to use what bathroom. Meanwhile, we've got a potential nuclear war brewing out there, and it is escalating. And, one thing that I saw yesterday that I didn't know about was that we have special forces soldiers in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, so Russia is now bombing pretty much indiscriminately in Ukraine because things are not going as well as they'd hoped on trying to take over military targets. So now they're going after cities, which means our guys are out there. I suspect our government hopes that some of our soldiers get killed because that gives them an excuse to escalate, which is just, why are we doing this? What possible reason can we have for risking the incineration of our kids and our grandkids over, real estate on the other side of the world? It's crazy.
That's a completely corrupt regime there too, as well. We know that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really a government that we should care about saving one way or the other. And, it's a border dispute. So far away from us that 99% of Americans could not find where it's happening on a map. And yet we seem to think it's, I'll tell you why it probably is important, is that it makes a lot of money for the military industrial complex. The more we expand NATO, the more we force countries that are not in NATO to respond and to defend themselves and thereby becoming a threat, the more weapons we sell. And the more contributions the incumbent politicians take in from the defense contractors. So this is terrible. We're almost objectively evil right now. And that's not something we've really been able to say with certainty in our lifetimes.
Hey, don't forget, all of these countries are sitting with Soviet-era weaponry. And, they armed all of Eastern Europe and numerous other countries. Now, those countries are pretty much finding out that stuff is garbage. And where are they going to buy their new weapons from? The U.S. and from China,
Yep.
So It's great for business. It's a great time to be a defense contractor. Not that there's a bad time to be a defense contractor, but during war, that's the best time. So
Kerry,
huge weapon sales.
Previous wars were a good time to be a defense contractor, but I don't think that Raytheon's factories are immune from they're targets in a nuclear war, right? So these hypersonic missiles could be landing on General Dynamics main factory or their corporate headquarters any minute now if this thing really escalates. And so this isn't a good deal for anybody really, except these short-sighted guys who think it's a good deal because the coming quarter will be nice and fat for them to calculate their bonuses off of. Very scary. And it's funny. How people used to criticize us for laughing when we were talking about stuff going on in the world. Yeah. And it was because we were talking about financial crises, which are, they're survivable. There are things that you can get through and you can make a lot of money from. And then maybe rebuild something better afterwards. But that's not what a nuclear war is. That's a whole different story. So hopefully everybody comes to their senses sooner rather than later. But right now, it's not looking promising.
Well, my next prediction is that Tesla will start making tanks because, while it's a good time to be a nuclear or a weapon salesman, like that Nicolas Cage movie, Lord of War, it's an even better time to be a tank salesman because so many tanks are getting destroyed on both sides that, and then you wind up with electric tanks because they use less energy. It costs $100 a gallon to deliver a gallon of diesel to a battlefront. because it's so hard to get it there. And now, you know, everything's going electric. So,
Well,
but it's going to help climate change by having electric tanks, right?
well, you know what you're seeing in California now is you're seeing pictures of Teslas and other electric cars connected to gasoline generators in order to charge them because the charging station is out because they're having brownouts and blackouts there, and they're saying don't charge your electric cars for 6 more hours, things like that. So people to get to work have to pull out a generator, use gasoline to charge their electric car. So see, this is what we would normally be laughing about the big mistakes we made with our energy grid. That's funny. You can make money from it by buying uranium stocks or whatever, or battery materials, and then we get through it. We figure out the mistakes that we made, we go back and correct them, and then we go forward. We can do that with the energy grid, and that would be awesome if a big financial crisis and a messed up energy grid turns out to be the worst problem we have in 2023. I would consider that a major win.
Yeah, well, in theory, if my power goes out, I have a generator, I can charge my Tesla, but it will cost me more money than using gasoline for for a car, or, just using the grid to
Well,
charge up my car.
so,
But
so Kerry, kind of an off-topic question here. Then why don't you have solar panels on your roof? It seems like that's a natural in Florida. You use the sun to charge your Tesla, and then you use your Tesla to run your house at night.
that's the next step. Teslas don't have bidirectional charging, meaning the charge only goes to the Tesla, but I think it's a software change could be done, perhaps. But yeah, solar panels are next. It's kind of like you can't get 100% solar, but you can get 60% of your energy needs served by solar. I would say that's pretty reasonable. And yeah, I mean, how many emergencies can I prepare for here, John? There's a limit. I got food, I got a pool full of water with a filter, and I got a generator and impact windows. But when the missiles start flying, none of that's going to matter, right?
Yeah, it is. It won't, but it sounds like you got through the hurricane pretty well. At least it looks like it went up above you guys.
Yeah, it didn't hit us. It hit the West Coast, moved over to the East Coast in northern Florida. It was a real mess. I have a lot of friends over there. This is a case where you don't want to be near the water. Always been my philosophy. But in this case, when the hurricane swept across the state from West Coast to East Coast and then up the Atlantic, uh, inland houses were actually flooded, which is something that's highly, highly unusual. Usually a hurricane hits one coast or the other. There's been a few instances over the years where they crisscross the state. Uh, One time, like back in '05 or 6, hurricane started in the East Coast, crossed over to the West Coast, and then crossed back over. But generally, like there's only so many disasters that you can prepare for. That's what I've learned here. And then the rest is just a roll of the dice. But moving on to other things, like PayPal was trying to penalize subscribers $2,500 if they got caught disseminating quote unquote misinformation, fake news. What was that
Yeah,
about?
that's right. PayPal is going to take money out of your account if you say something that contradicts the official line of the government now, which means um, you and I would be broke by now if that thing
Yeah.
was in place for the last couple of years. They would have just drained us dry. So that might, they might have been thinking about that as a nearly risk-free new income stream, right?
Yeah, well, I
Just
got caught though.
yeah,
Probably.
yeah. They got caught, and then they took it back right away. They came out and said,
Oh, we
"Oh,
weren't
that
going to
that
do that.
language wasn't supposed to be in our terms of use," And
Us, not
um,
us. We wouldn't do that. Meantime, they've helped deplatform, demonetize countless content creators around the world for saying stuff that they don't like. And hey, who started PayPal? Well, Musk didn't start it, but he was instrumental in
mhm.
its success. And you know, I guess he's got to buy PayPal back too while he's at it, right?
Yeah, he should do that. He should take his Tesla profits and just buy back a complete ecosystem of free speech, social media, and payment platforms, and then just put that up against Google and Facebook, and I think he would win handily, because people are so mad now because this stuff used to be subtle, like shadow banning or something like that. And now it's completely blatant. Like if you're a renowned immunologist and you come out and say something about natural immunity vis-a-vis some virus,
Health issue.
it's a health issue where you're a world well-known expert,
Yeah.
and they will kick you off because it disagrees with what the idiots at the CDC say this week, and they're going to change their mind in 2 weeks. But right now, you can be deplatformed for saying something that disagrees with them. But on the bright side, so much of what they've done has turned out to be wrong in the last few years. The quote unquote the science, that we were
follow the science, John.
Yeah,
follow the
wrong.
science, whatever you do.
Yeah, and so so much of it has been proven to be completely wrong that they've lost all their credibility. So the public health used to be the one thing we trusted out of everything. Like you look at a disaster movie or anything about a pandemic or anything, and it was always the guy from the CDC who was the trustworthy one, right? Who was trying to do the good job. And now in 2 years, they've completely flipped that script on its head, and they are the buffoons working for a corrupt government. It's amazing how fast they screwed up their reputation. So and anyhow, back to social media. It means that
talking about that medical stuff, one of the things of Obamacare was electronic records was going to fix everything and make the system cheaper because of all the replication, duplication. In the meantime, when they, during the whole health issue, when they found people prescribing certain unapproved, untested, in their mind, drugs, these people were slammed right away because it was picked up in their electronic record database, and they were reprimanded for doing what they thought was right. So this is yet another thing, not social media, but the globalization of healthcare records and monitoring of them through algorithms. And man,
Yeah. It used to be that you really wanted your health records to be searchable by these trustworthy guys in the public health system because they could save you. If they looked at all your drugs and saw an interaction that might be dangerous, they could alert you. There were a lot of things they could do to help you by being able to see your records. Now, no way. You do not want those guys to have any access to any personal information. There's another one that just came out in the last couple of weeks where they, I might not have the details of this one quite right, but there are codes for different kinds of purchases in the, say, the Visa network.
Oh, for the guns, yes. So that is true. Correct.
They're going to add an entry for any gun-related purchase, which wasn't there previously. And so they would know who's buying ammo, who owns a gun,
Which
again,
are legal.
We don't want these guys to know this stuff anymore.
Which is legal in, now in every state. If it's not legal now, it will be shortly, because these very, I don't want to talk about colors of states, but say very progressive states have sought to circumvent the Supreme Court's decision on the Second Amendment by saying, if you walk out on the sidewalk, you can't be armed. All sorts of places, and they're being struck down. And the end result, over a course of a few years, will be that that basically universal carry will carry the day, because that's the way it has to be. But we don't really talk about that stuff. But what we do talk about is interest rates, bond yields, and Bank of England. The oldest central bank around, still working, right? I think is having a tough time with their yield control measures.
Yeah, the Bank of England was founded by Isaac Newton, so it is a venerable institution. So here's what happened in Great Britain. like the US, they started raising interest rates, started tightening their monetary policy because they had raging inflation. Well, their long-term interest rates started to go up because the central bank was no longer buying those bonds, and somebody else had to step in, and the new buyers wanted a higher interest rate. And then it turned out that a lot of the British pension funds were making money by borrowing short and lending long. In other words, they were investing in long bonds that they had to cover by rolling over short-term loans. But the cost of those short-term loans were going up above the income that they were generating from those bonds. In other words, the yield curve was inverting, and that was blowing up the pension funds. So there was a risk of a whole big financial sector in the UK economy just blowing up. So they had to go back to trying to force down interest rates by buying government paper while they're still raising interest rates, which means they're tightening with one hand and loosening with the other hand. This is one of those things that incompetent institutions try to do when they've run out of legitimate policy options, and those things, the illegitimate policy options that are clearly illogical and dangerous, will end up blowing up too. So in response to the fact that this probably isn't going to work, British interest rates are going back up again. And that means that it's possible that they have to ramp up their bond buying, which means they got to create a bunch of new pound sterling, dump it into the market in order to buy these bonds, which is very inflationary. So that'll make the pound's foreign exchange value go down, which will push up interest rates even further, so they've got kind of a death spiral possibility there. And there really isn't any kind of a fix short of inflation miraculously going back down to 2%. And unless that happens, then the British central bank is kind of blazing the trail for the rest of the world's central banks. They're making the mistakes right now that we in the US and the Japanese central bank and the ECB will all be forced into in the coming year. So get ready. Major explosions coming, and just watch Britain to see what they're going to look like here.
Hey, for sure. So used car prices and housing prices in certain areas, not yet in Florida, but to some extent here as well, from what I've heard, starting to decline for the first time since the pandemic.
Yeah. So now we've got cross currents out there. Before, everything was inflating. 6 months ago, pretty much everything was going up, and that's how we got these massive inflation numbers. Now we've got energy going up, and food going up, and housing, and what was the other thing? Oh, used cars going down. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Which one outweighs the others. I suspect in the short run, food and energy will still give us inflation that is way above the 2% target. But a little further out, housing tanking is a very big deal. And even though labor markets are pretty tight right now, a lot of companies are announcing big layoffs. So labor might be a lot less tight pretty soon, and wages might go up more slowly or even roll over. So we could be looking at kind of a mirror image of today's economy in another 6 months, where stocks are so far down that the negative wealth effect has kicked in. People are spending less, companies are hiring less, a lot of prices are going down, houses are tanking. Maybe we'll finally be able to buy used cars. I'm in the market for a 3-year-old pickup truck, so I'm watching this with interest. It'll be nice to see something like that go down to its 1999 price or 2009 price, something like that.
Well,
but
we should also talk, as long as we're talking housing, lumber prices, they have skidded. It's like down to 458 right now, I think, as we speak, and it hasn't seen a level that low since June of 2020, which that's certainly a forward indicator of housing prices, because lumber at one point when it skyrocketed, it was at like 1600, 1700, it had quadrupled nearly, and it was adding $30,000 to the price of a new home. You think the builders have cut back on their prices now that their lumber and copper and other materials, commodities that they use are going down in price? Although I'm sure their labor is uh, is also going up as well, right?
Well, actually, I think builders are going to have to cut back by that amount and more pretty soon because with mortgage rates nearly 7%, the, uh, the actual cost of buying a house with a mortgage is now double what it was 2 years ago in a lot of places, and it was already unaffordable 2 years ago, the average house. So now we're at the point where, yeah, go ahead and build a house, build a spec house with your nice cheap lumber. You're still going to have trouble selling it because anybody who has to take out a mortgage is going to be shocked at what their monthly payments are going to be, and they're liable to say, "No, at this price, I can't do it. I'm sorry." So falling lumber prices are a leading indicator of home prices because that implies that fewer and fewer homes are being built. And the reason for that is that fewer and fewer people can afford a brand new house, so but if you look at almost any other industrial or agricultural commodity right now, um, you see that a lot of them spiked in June and have been coming off more or less since then. So there is a trend towards lower inflation and maybe even deflation in certain sectors out there. And, we'll have to see. At the same time, you've got currency values plunging, which is inflationary in most countries other than the US. So we'll see. I don't know. A lot of cross currents, a very messy economy, likely to dominate the headlines in 2023. We'll probably be in a recession by then, and a big chunk of the world is already in a recession. So the question now is, will it be worse than 2008, 2009? And I think the answer is very possibly. You never know for sure how these things are going to play out. But back then, we didn't have raging inflation across the board that was forcing central banks to raise interest rates as aggressively as they are. And assets weren't as overvalued, and there wasn't as much debt. We doubled global debt pretty much in the last 15 years. And that is this massive headwind for an economy. We're going to have to run the numbers next time we talk so we can say with certainty what it costs the US if our average borrowing price goes up to 5%, let's say, which is still historically low. I think that's something like $1.5 trillion in interest costs each year for the US. It's some crazy number like that. And if we don't stop there and we go up to 8 or 9%, that's pretty much what we get in tax revenue right now. So all our tax revenues will be going to pay interest on the national debt. That's a portrait of a dying economy right there when that happens.
Yeah, as bad as negative interest rates were, super high interest rates aren't good either. Hey, right now, the ETF for home shares, for home construction, which is called ITB, one of them, there's five, it peaked on, when did it peak? In December of 2021 at around 83. It had crashed down in June of this year to 49, and it hasn't really recovered that much. It's at 55 right now. So the ETF is also a good forward look at home buying in the US because it's the home builder ETF. So presumably their shares, the home builders, are going to anticipate these moves. It's not at maybe depression levels, but it certainly has come down quite a bit. So,
oh yeah, in the housing bust of the previous decade, they went down a lot further than this. So it's completely possible that they have another leg down from here, and implying that fewer and fewer people are buying new houses. So we'll see. But anybody who built a house last year paid 30 or 40% more than if they had waited a year. So timing is everything in cyclical markets.
So it is a question of whether all the gains that we saw over the past 2 years, 20% back to back, in 2020 and 2021 increase in housing prices, whether they'll all be taken back or not, probably a good chunk of it will. But that ETF that we mentioned there was down to like 8 back in 2009. So that's how low it can go. So, hey, what about the French police? They're checking fuel levels of cars, buying gas, and if you're not close enough to empty, they turn you away.
This is one of those, are we in the 1970s again
Only the
questions?
French.
Yeah, because right now in France, they're having gasoline shortages. And they've got the cops there checking your fuel level when you pull in to fill up. And if you're, half a tank, they say, "No, sorry, you don't need gas yet," and they send you on your way. And which means you're going to go to the next gas station and try to fill up, because that's scary. If the cops tell you it's
Of course.
a national security issue that you can't buy any more gasoline, you want to buy as much as you can.
That's
And
for sure.
we're less likely in the U.S. to see something like that happen, because we produce a lot of oil and gas domestically, and if we have to, we just don't export anything. We just keep it all here, which means everybody else's prices go up, but we're in better shape. So North America, as far as energy goes, is really the best place to be, other than the Middle East.
Energy, water, as long as you're not out west.
Yeah, we do
That's
have
areas.
we have places with water. Not every place has water, but a lot of places do. And we've got pretty good demographics, because Mexico has so many 20-year-old workers,
hmm
and demographics also because Canada has so much land per capita. So this is a good place to be, to ride out an energy / financial crisis.
Yeah.
Although we'll still see our financial asset prices plunge, and we'll see political chaos, and these midterm elections are going to be
Real circus.
possibly very serious. Yeah, because it looks like now that crime. What's the other one? It's crime and is it the economy? I
Crime
guess
and
maybe.
inflation.
Oh, crime and
Inflation
inflation. That's right.
like nobody knew what inflation was for 40 years, John. Like literally, you'd have trouble finding it in the dictionary. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking inflation. Of course, you and I never stopped talking about it. It was just stealthily hidden. I mean, the money supply continued to go up way past the GDP and way past the population growth. We've talked about it since we know each other, and that's 11 years. But going back further, it never really went away. It just became less of a nuisance.
hmm Yeah, yeah, and
35%, nobody knows.
and right now the Republicans have a big lead in polling on those two issues, which implies that they'll take back the House and maybe take back the Senate, which means we'll have a divided government for the 2 years after that. Which you can make the case that a divided government does less harm than one that can actually do things, because what they want to do is so stupid. But it means it's going to be hard to really address any crisis when it comes, because the two sides will have very different opinions about how we fix things. So we're liable to be kind of hamstrung
Well,
after this election.
to a certain extent, that is true, certainly because when it comes to economic issues, both sides are disingenuous and basically lie, don't want to talk about why things have gotten where they have, because then they would actually have to do something about it. It's easier to blame speculators and oil companies and everyone else, and they're both guilty of it. But if you look in Florida, DeSantis and Biden were hanging out, and well, I wouldn't say they're saying nice things about each other, but they weren't saying bad things about each other. So maybe that's something there, but I'm not overly optimistic. But this could be the Onion headline of the week. The Bernanke wins Nobel Prize for economics for crisis economics research. I mean, like, hey, I don't get that. Then Doug Casey should have gotten a Nobel Prize too,
Well, it's important to understand what this illustrates. Well, two things really. One is that the dominant school of economics, which is Keynesianism, doesn't recognize debt as something that exists in their models. So you can, if you're a government, you can create as much debt as you want to, and as long as you're generating 3% more consumer spending each year, the Canadians think you did a good job. So that's why you can give someone like Bernanke, who presided over the biggest debt bubble in human history prior to this one, you can give him a prize for good economic thought, because you're ignoring the big flaw in his thought. So, giving him the Nobel Peace Prize or Economics Prize is kind of like giving an arsonist the Fireman of the Year award or something like that. He created the problems, and then he created a lot of new money to smooth those problems over for a short time until they blew up again. And the idea that is is genius economics is just astounding, and it shows how much trouble we're in, because the people in charge really just don't know what they don't know, and they have incredibly powerful tools. Yeah.
Well, maybe putting an arsonist in charge of a property and casualty insurance company, stupefies. It really does. Well, our last issue here is precious metals, which today it's 10/10/22. Happy Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day or whatever, is basically getting creamed again.
Yeah, gold is in the 16s now, and silver is like 20, more or less. And those are both low numbers compared to the last couple of years. And the reason that they're not soaring on double-digit inflation is because the markets are looking at the damage being done by a soaring dollar and by spiking interest rates around the world, and expecting some kind of a shock to the downside. That's why everybody's selling equities. U.S. stocks were down last time I looked. I don't know what they're doing now, but they were down in the morning, and they've been down irregularly for most of the last few months. And that's affecting precious metals, which is pretty much how it goes. It happened in 2008. Everything tanked. Precious metals did a V bottom. They really dropped, and then they took off. 2020, pandemic panic, and same thing. Stocks tanked, precious metals tanked, and then they took off again. Now, in both of those cases, that was because the central banks of the world immediately pivoted to extreme ease. And so the question is, what's the point at which they think the markets have suffered enough and they're willing to pivot again? And we don't know that, because with inflation being what it is, the story isn't the same as it was those last two times. So we'll see. It could be that financial asset prices have to be smacked much harder than they have been in order to spook the central banks of the world to start easing again. Or it could be that a lot of financial institutions just start to blow up the way British pension funds did. And the central banks will find they have no choice. Inflation, whatever. They can't have the pension funds of their country go out of business, because lots of voters have pensions, and so they'll have to step in and start easing again. So we just can't know that. This is all stuff that is like, you wake up in the morning and the world has changed because some crazy thing happened somewhere else. I think gold and silver are still extremely important places to be, things to own, because they protect you in the long run against a crazy world. And if you want to describe this world with one word, crazy is the one to use. So I think that to the extent that you can get gold and silver anywhere near current spot prices, you should be buying. Of course, it's not that easy to do. With silver, if you want to buy a silver eagle coin right now, it's $32, even though silver spot price is 20.
Correct.
So there are other coins like the Austrian Philharmonics that are like 26, which I think is a bargain right now. But you still, no matter what, you got to pay a much higher price than the spot price. But if you can get silver coins for something not too far beyond today's spot price, I think that's a steal. They might go a little lower from here, but at some point in the next few years, there'll be some multiple of what you can get them for today. Just because eventually the central banks do have to ease again. They're going to have to come back and do quantitative easing for the record books, and there's no avoiding that. And at that point, precious metals will just take off. So, it could be that we'll look back on this as one last gift from Mr. Market, one last chance to back up the truck. But again, time will tell. We don't know for sure, but I'm kind of leaning that way.
Yeah, well, it's look, the dollar is at $1.13 on the Dixie index right now. And I always say it's the best looking house in Baltimore, and that kind of says it all, because that's screwing up everything, because all that dollar denominated debt got 20% more expensive, just like your mortgage did. And any debt that you owe here, the cost of owning a home went up 50% to buy one now. But if you bought it a year ago, no. That's significant, and it's driving these countries into bankruptcy, and food prices, all these things. Well, hey, the troubles of the world, I think we addressed enough of them today. Hey, make sure you go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com, send me an email, and we will discuss it with John. John was the founder of dollarcollapse.com and is now brilliantly picked the exact right moment for retirement. I'm envious, John, but hey, we'll do it in a couple more weeks.
All right. Thanks, Kerry. See you soon.